The afternoon Donna Reeves told the entire Pinehurst Commons Neighborhood Association that my catering kitchen was offering a free community buffet every Thursday and that I had personally invited everyone to come help themselves. I was 40 minutes away finishing a corporate luncheon for 80 people and had no idea that 31 of my neighbors had shown up at my property between 11 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. Worked their way through $600 worth of prepared food I had staged for Friday's wedding rehearsal dinner, and left my prep kitchen in the kind of condition that happens when 31 people who believe they are guests at a free buffet help themselves to food they did not pay for in a professional kitchen they have no business being in. My name is Ren Calloway. I am 48 years old, a licensed commercial caterer and certified food safety manager with 20 years of experience in event catering and commercial food production, and I have operated my catering business from a permitted commercial kitchen on my residential property in the Pinehurst Commons HOA development in central Georgia for 6 years. The kitchen had been built as a professional addition to my house, permitted by the county, inspected by the Georgia Department of Public Health, and approved by the HOA under a home occupation variance that I had applied for, documented thoroughly, and received in year 2 of my ownership after demonstrating that the kitchen operation met all applicable residential and commercial standards. The variance had been a significant undertaking. I had prepared a 30-page application that included floor plans, equipment specifications, health department pre-approval, a traffic impact analysis showing that client pickups would not materially affect neighborhood traffic patterns, a noise assessment, a waste management plan, and letters from my 5 immediate neighbors indicating they had no objection. The HOA board had reviewed the application over 2 meetings, asked 12 specific questions that I had answered in writing, and approved it by a 4-to-1 vote with one condition: that client pickups and deliveries be limited to the hours between 8 in the morning and 6 in the evening on weekdays, and between 9 and 4 on Saturdays. I had operated under those conditions without incident for 4 years. My immediate neighbors had received catering food on 3 occasions when I had surplus from events, which I had delivered personally as a goodwill gesture. The kitchen had produced revenue that allowed me to employ 2 part-time prep cooks and a full-time assistant, all of whom lived within 10 miles of the development and whose employment I considered a community benefit. Donna Reeves had moved to Pinehurst Commons 14 months ago. She owned Unit 7 in the Eastern Cluster, 2 properties from mine, and she had the specific quality I had come to recognize in certain HOA communities of someone who experienced other people's professional success as a comment on their own situation. She had asked me twice in the first 3 months whether she could have catering food at a discount, and I had told her both times that I did not offer resident discounts because my pricing was set by my cost structure and my margins were not sufficient for discretionary discounting. She had said she understood, but the way she had said it had not entirely sounded like understanding. She had attended 2 HOA meetings in her first 6 months and had raised questions both times about whether my kitchen operation was fully compliant with the variance conditions. The board had reviewed my compliance record both times and confirmed I was in full compliance. Donna had accepted the findings without further comment at the meetings, but I had noticed that her manner toward me in the neighborhood had cooled following the second review. In month 11, she had filed a formal complaint asserting that my kitchen produced odors that constituted a nuisance. The county health department had inspected in response and found my ventilation system fully compliant with commercial kitchen exhaust standards. The complaint had been closed. In month 12, she had filed a complaint asserting that my delivery vehicles were exceeding the variance's traffic parameters. I had pulled my delivery logs for the prior 6 months and presented them to the board. Every delivery and pickup had occurred within the permitted hours. The complaint had been closed. In month 13, she had filed a complaint asserting that I was operating a retail food establishment without a retail food service license. The Georgia Department of Agriculture had reviewed my licensing status, confirmed I held a valid commercial catering license, and noted that my operation was a licensed catering facility and not a retail establishment, and therefore did not require a retail food service license. The complaint had been closed. 3 closed complaints in 3 months. I had documented all of them in my operations file the way I documented everything related to my kitchen compliance, methodically and completely, because a commercial kitchen in a residential zone operates on a variance that requires demonstrated compliance, and I had understood from the day I applied that the compliance record was the variance's foundation. What I had not anticipated was what Donna did with the information she had gathered through 3 months of complaint-based investigation into my operation. She had learned, through the complaint process, that I had a fully stocked commercial kitchen, that I staged food for events the day before, and that I was away from the property for extended periods on event days. She had also learned, apparently, that I operated under a home occupation variance rather than a full commercial zoning designation, which she had somehow interpreted as a vulnerability she could exploit. What she did with this information was tell people I had a free buffet. Not subtly, not ambiguously. She had sent a message to the Pinehurst Commons neighborhood group text thread, a group I was also a member of, saying that I had generously offered my catering kitchen as a community resource every Thursday and that neighbors were welcome to stop by between 11 and 2 for complimentary catering food. She had tagged me in the message, which meant I received the notification but had been at the corporate luncheon site since 7 in the morning and had not checked the group thread until 2:15 when I was loading the catering van for return. I looked at the message at 2:15 from the parking lot of the corporate event venue. I read it twice. Then I called my assistant, a woman named Cara Santos, who had been with me for 4 years and who had been at my kitchen that morning doing prep work for Friday's rehearsal dinner. Cara answered on the first ring. She said, "Ren, I have been trying to reach you for 3 hours." I said, "Tell me." She said 31 people came through the kitchen today, starting at 11. They said you had invited them. I told them you had not, but they showed me the message, and some of them were quite insistent. By 12:30, I had stopped trying to turn them away because the situation was becoming difficult and I did not know what my authority was. I said, "What did they take?" She said most of the shrimp cocktail display, both of the salmon fillets, one of the 3 beef tenderloin pieces, the entire cheese and charcuterie arrangement, 4 of the 12 individual dessert portions, the champagne punch I had prepared for the rehearsal dinner welcome reception. I said, "The champagne punch." She said, "All of it. I am sorry, Ren, I did not know how to stop them." I said, "It is not your fault. Close the kitchen and do not let anyone else in. I will be there in 40 minutes. I was there in 37. The kitchen was in the condition Cara had described. The staging tables that should have held Friday's rehearsal dinner components were partially cleared. The champagne punch bowl was empty and the ladle was on the wrong shelf. The cheese boards were gone. $612 of prepared food based on my rapid cost assessment, plus the punch, which was another $48 in ingredients and 3 hours of Cara's labor. I photographed everything before I moved anything. The staging tables, the missing items, the current state of the refrigeration units, the punch bowl, the kitchen generally. I pulled my kitchen entry camera footage, which I maintained as part of my health department compliance requirements, because commercial kitchens serving food to the public are required to log access. The footage showed 31 separate entry events between 11:04 and 1:57, with clear face captures of all 31 individuals. I recognized 22 of them as Pinehurst Commons residents. The other 9 I could not immediately identify. I called my attorney Diana Marsh before I called anyone else. She said, "She told your neighbors you were offering free food and they came and took it." I said, "Yes, $660 in food and labor, 31 people. Some of them are on my kitchen entry camera." She said, "The neighborhood group text message. Do you have it?" I said, "I am a member of the thread. I have the message with her name and the timestamp." She said she used the group thread to direct 31 people to take food from your commercial kitchen staging area. That is intentional misrepresentation leading to property conversion. It is also a potential interference with your business operation because the food she directed people to take was staged for a paying client's event. I said Friday's rehearsal dinner. I have a contract for that event. The shrimp cocktail display and the salmon and the beef and the cheese and the champagne punch were all specifically contracted items. She said she directed people to take contracted client goods from your commercial kitchen. I said yes. Diana said, how much does the client need replaced before Friday? I said everything that was taken. My suppliers can deliver tomorrow, but the rushed order will cost me the standard order premium plus the loss of the food cost on the items that were taken. I am estimating $940 total to make the client whole. She said, do not touch the staging area until I have spoken to you. I want to photograph the damages professionally if possible. I said I have photographed everything. Cara has photographed everything. The kitchen entry camera has footage of all 31 entries. She was quiet for a moment. She said, you maintain commercial kitchen entry logs. I said health department compliance requirement for catering facilities. Every entry to the staging and prep areas is logged by camera with timestamp and face capture. She said, you have photographic evidence of every person who took food from your kitchen. I said, yes. Diana said, Ren, I want you to take a breath, and then I want you to do something for me. I said, tell me. She said, I want you to send the neighborhood group thread a message right now that says you did not invite anyone to use your kitchen, that the message from Donna Reeves was false, that your kitchen is a licensed commercial facility and not a community resource, and that you will be following up with each person who entered your kitchen today regarding the food that was taken. I said, should I mention the camera footage? She said, mention that your kitchen maintains mandatory health department entry logs and that you have documentation of all entries from today. I sent the message. The thread went from active to silent in approximately 90 seconds, which was the amount of time it took for 22 people who had helped themselves to what they believed was a free buffet to read the words mandatory health department entry logs and understand what that meant. Diana sent a formal demand letter to Donna Reeves that same evening. It was 5 pages. It documented the neighborhood thread message with timestamp, Donna's name as author, the 31 documented entries, the food taken, the cost of replacement including the rush order premium, Cara's 3 hours of additional labor to replace the champagne punch, and the full scope of the interference with my contracted client event. It demanded reimbursement of $940 for the client replacement costs, $212 for Cara's additional labor, and all of Diana's fees. It also formally notified Donna that her conduct had potentially exposed her to liability for business interference, given that the food taken was contracted client goods. 21 of the 22 residents I had identified sent me messages that evening or the following morning. Every single message expressed some version of the same thing, that they had believed the message, that they were embarrassed, that they were sorry. 19 of them offered to pay for what they had taken. 3 of them brought food to my door. One of them, a woman named Rosa Park, who had lived in Pinehurst Commons for 11 years and who I had always liked, came to my door with a check for $80, which she estimated was the value of what she had taken, and said, I should have called you before I came. I said yes, and I thanked her for the check and for the honesty and meant both. I accepted reimbursement from 12 of the 22, totaling $411, which I applied against the replacement costs. The remaining residents had either not taken significant items or had contributed in other ways that I accepted in the spirit in which they were offered. The 22nd resident I had identified was Donna herself, who had been among the 31 entries on my camera log. She had come to my kitchen at 12:51 and had taken, based on the footage and Cara's recollection, a full salmon fillet and a significant portion of the charcuterie arrangement. She had not messaged me. She had not offered to pay. She had sent no communication of any kind. The 9 residents I had not immediately identified were resolved within 2 days when Diana sent the camera footage stills to the HOA management company and asked for their assistance identifying residents. The management company identified 6 of them from their resident database. 3 remained unidentified, having apparently been guests of residents rather than residents themselves. Diana filed the civil claim the following week. The claim against Donna covered the replacement costs net of the voluntary contributions I had received, the remaining labor costs, Diana's fees, and a separate element Diana called intentional business interference, which covered the damage to my catering operations professional standing caused by Donna's false representation that my licensed commercial kitchen was a community resource. She also filed a civil claim against the HOA, asserting that the variance approval had been undermined by a board member's conduct, since Donna had been appointed to the HOA Architectural Committee 2 months earlier, and that the HOA had an obligation to address conduct by committee members that damaged homeowners operating under board-approved variances. The HOA response was swift. The board held an emergency session the week after the claims were filed. Donna was removed from the Architectural Committee by unanimous vote. The board sent a community-wide message clarifying that my kitchen was a licensed commercial facility operating under a home occupation variance and was not a community resource or amenity of any kind. The board also sent individual notices to the 6 identifiable non-resident trespassers, noting that entry to another resident's commercial facility without authorization constituted trespass. The board settled the HOA's portion of the claim in 2 weeks. They paid $4,000 from their reserve fund, covering a portion of my replacement costs and legal fees, in exchange for a release of the institutional liability claim. The settlement also included a formal board resolution affirming my variance and specifically stating that the kitchen operation was fully compliant and would not be subject to further complaint-based review without new material information. Donna's settlement took longer because Donna retained Philip Cross, who appeared in several of these stories and who had by this point developed a practiced familiarity with the pattern of reviewing overwhelming documentation and recommending settlement. Philip called Diana 2 weeks after the claim was filed. His opening position was that Donna had not anticipated the food she directed people to take was contracted client goods, and that her liability should be limited to the actual food replacement costs. Diana said the food was staged in a licensed commercial kitchen for a contracted event. The kitchen's commercial status was documented in the variance approval that Donna had reviewed as part of 3 complaint investigations in the preceding 3 months. She knew the kitchen was commercial. She knew it staged client food. She directed 31 people to take that food. Philip said she believed the kitchen also functioned as a personal pantry. Diana said a licensed commercial catering kitchen is not a personal pantry. This is not an ambiguous distinction. The settlement was $14,300. Donna paid it personally. Her homeowner's insurance declined coverage because the false statement directing people to take food from a neighbor's commercial kitchen was an intentional act that fell outside accidental occurrence coverage. Friday's rehearsal dinner happened as contracted. The replacement items arrived Thursday morning in Cara, and I restaged the entire display. The champagne punch was remade. The salmon and shrimp and beef and cheese were all present in the correct quantities. The client did not know what had happened on Thursday because they had no reason to know, and it had been resolved before it affected them. The event went correctly. It always went correctly when I had prepared it correctly, and I had prepared it correctly. That was the standard I held for every event, and it was the standard the variance had been approved on the basis of, and it was the standard I was going to maintain regardless of what anyone in my neighborhood decided to do with their Thursday afternoons. Rosa Park brought me a bag of produce from her garden 2 weeks after the settlement. She said, "I am still embarrassed." I said, "You sent a check the same evening. That is all I needed." She said, "I should have known better than to take food from your kitchen without asking." I said the message was convincing. She said, "I know, Donna, I should have been more skeptical." I said, "We are all more skeptical now." She laughed, she handed me the produce and went home. I put the produce in the kitchen and stood for a moment in the commercial kitchen that I had spent 2 years permitting and 4 years operating without incident and 6 months defending against complaints that had all been closed, and one very strange Thursday defending against the consequences of a false community buffet announcement. The kitchen was clean and staged for Saturday's corporate event. The entry log was current and complete. The variance file was in my office, organized by date. The documentation folder was thorough. Everything was as it should be. Everything was always as it should be when you documented correctly and maintained your compliance and operated your business with the standard your clients deserved and your variance required. That was the whole operation. That had always been the whole operation. Thumbnail text: she told 31 neighbors it was a free buffet. The commercial kitchen's health department entry log had all their faces.